The Lancet is one of the world's oldest and best-known medical journals, but right now it is caught in the crossfire between the United States and China over the origins of the pandemic. The journal has been conducting its own assessment of the pandemic, and China is not happy about it. Why? Because they are talking about the possibility of a lab leak. Beijing claims that the Lancet is under pressure from the US government to investigate the Wuhan laboratory. The head of Lancet's investigation has denied this. He says there is no outside pressure. But now an internal debate is underway. Remember, last year, Lancet had dismissed the possibility of a lab leak. Now it has been forced to reconsider it. Its own credibility has come under question. In the early days of the pandemic, Lancet ran an editorial. It completely ruled out the possibility of a lab leak. This is what it looked like. It ended with a declaration: "We declare no competing interests." The signatories claimed that they had no conflict of interest. It turns out that wasn't the case. This letter was engineered by a certain Peter Daszak, the man who was funding research at the Wuhan laboratory through American grants. Peter Daszak himself is a signatory to this letter. He claimed that he had no conflict of interest when he clearly had one. But the Lancet took Daszak at his word and published the letter. When the whole funding story unraveled and Daszak made headlines, Lancet tried some damage control. It made an embarrassing addendum to the old letter. And Peter Daszak recused himself from the Lancet Commission that is studying the virus and its origins. Last week, we spoke to Nicholas Wade, a prominent science author and journalist. His research put the focus back on the lab leak theory recently. He raised questions on the role of medical journals like The Lancet. He said that they put their thumb on the scale. They backed the natural origins theory without any concrete evidence. What does this say about the credibility of journals like the Lancet and others that dismiss this theory without due diligence?
They have put their thumb on the scale in favor of natural emergence and against lab leak when they had no evidence for doing so. There was no reason to favor one theory over another. And Nature should have allowed both sides to present their views. That's the duty of a leading scientific journal. Instead, Nature published letters from the virologists who dismissed lab leak, and not only that, it has put warning notices on various other papers it has published.
It's not just the possibility of a lab leak. Apparently, the Lancet was also reluctant to take on China on the issue of human rights. Thomas Schultz is a prominent German psychiatrist. Earlier this year, he sent a proposal to Richard Horton, who is the editor-in-chief of The Lancet. He asked The Lancet to start a debate on the complicity of Chinese scientists in the persecution of Uyghurs. He was alarmed by some reports from Xinjiang that said that China was gathering genetic data, enforcing sterilization campaigns, harvesting the organs of Uyghurs. Here is what the letter said: "We believe that the human rights situation in China has become unbearable and of unprecedented scope, that we cannot stay silent any longer and at least need to have an open discussion in the best academic tradition." Now, reports say the Lancet responded to this question with a flat no. Apparently, they did not want to do anything that might, quote-unquote, imperil the Lancet's editor in China. Basically, they did not want to offend the Chinese. The medical journal now seems to have had a change of heart. It wants to, and I'm quoting again, it wants to carefully scrutinize the origins of the virus. So as it sits down to reassess the facts, the Lancet must also reassess its own role. It should explain the compromised letters and the charges of editorial bias. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.